August 18, 1945. Lubang Island, Philippines. Early morning. The jungle is already alive. Cicadas scream from the canopy. Moist heat clings to skin and cloth, turning every breath into effort. A man crouches behind a fallen tree, rifle pressed to his shoulder, eyes fixed on a narrow path cutting through the undergrowth. His uniform is faded, patched in places with scraps of cloth. His boots are cracked. The rifle, an Arisaka Type 99, is oiled meticulously, despite the humidity. He has only a handful of rounds left, each one cleaned, checked, and counted. He listens. Somewhere beyond the trees, villagers are moving. He does not know their names. He does not want to. To him, they are part of the enemy-controlled world, a world that lies. The war, he is certain, is not over. 3 days earlier, on August 15th, Emperor Hirohito's voice crackled over Japanese radios for the first time in history, announcing Japan's surrender. In Tokyo, the sound shattered decades of myth. In cities reduced to ash, people wept, collapsed, or simply stared into nothing. But on remote islands like this one, that voice never arrived. And even when it did, through leaflets dropped from planes, through shouted warnings, through newspapers left deliberately in the open, men like this refused to believe it. Because believing it would mean something worse than death. It would mean dishonor. The soldier's name is not yet known to the outside world. To history, he will eventually become one of the holdouts. Japanese soldiers who continued fighting long after World War II officially ended. But here, in August 1945, he is simply doing what he was trained to do. Obey orders. Distrust the enemy. Never surrender. Especially never surrender. Years earlier, during his training, this man was taught that surrender was not a neutral act. It was not a temporary condition. It was a moral collapse. Captured soldiers were told they would be tortured. Their families would be shamed. Their names erased. Death, by contrast, was clean. Death preserved honor. Death meant loyalty proven beyond question. These ideas were not abstract. They were drilled relentlessly. Through lectures, physical punishment, ritual humiliation, and repetition so constant it became instinct. The Imperial Japanese Army did not simply train soldiers to fight. It trained them to believe. On Lubang Island, that belief hardens into reality. The soldier moves deeper into the jungle, away from open ground. He knows the terrain intimately now, where wild bananas grow, where fresh water collects after rain, where patrols can hide without leaving tracks. Foraging is survival. Movement is discipline. Silence is law. He and the others, because he is not alone, have survived by avoiding contact, stealing supplies at night, and attacking only when absolutely necessary. Every encounter is interpreted through the same lens. If the enemy says the war is over, it must be a trick. If the enemy offers peace, it must be bait. If fellow Japanese urge surrender, they must be collaborators or broken men. The idea that Japan could truly lose, that the emperor himself could order surrender, is psychologically impossible to accept. Because the emperor is not just a leader. He is sacred. To surrender without a direct order from a commanding officer feels unthinkable. To accept enemy declarations feels like betrayal. To lay down arms feels like erasing one's entire identity as a soldier. So the holdouts choose the only reality that allows them to continue existing without shame. They choose the war. Weeks pass. Then months. Leaflets appear again, this time with photographs of Japanese officers in Allied custody. Smiling, alive. The soldier studies them briefly, then burns them. Photographs can be faked. Documents forged. Voices imitated. His training prepared him for this. Enemy deception is infinite. Loyalty is not. As 1945 becomes 1946, then 1947, the jungle becomes both prison and sanctuary. The soldier's body adapts. Hunger dulls. Fear sharpens. Time loses shape. What does not change is belief. Belief that he is still under orders. Belief that survival equals duty. Belief that surrender equals annihilation, of self, of family, of honor. The outside world moves on. He does not. This is not madness. This is consistency taken to its extreme. And across the Pacific, on islands scattered like forgotten punctuation marks of the war, dozens of men like him make the same choice. Not because they are blind, but because they see the world through a framework that does not allow surrender to exist as an option. This is where the story truly begins. Not with the end of World War II, but with the moment some soldiers decided, consciously or not, that the war would never be allowed to end for them. Because to stop fighting would mean losing everything they believed themselves to be. 1939. Toyama Prefecture, Japan. Winter. Snow crunches under boots as a line of recruits stands rigid in the cold. Breath fogs the air. A sergeant paces slowly in front of them, bamboo switch in hand. His voice is calm, precise, absolute. You are already dead. No one moves. The statement is not metaphorical. It is instruction. From the first days of training, Imperial Japanese Army recruits are taught that their lives no longer belong to them, not to their families, not to themselves. They belong to the Emperor. And because the Emperor is divine, obedience is not just military duty. It is sacred obligation. This idea is reinforced until it becomes reflex. Training is relentless, but not in the way Western armies understand it. Physical hardship is constant. Hunger, exhaustion, pain. But psychological conditioning is the real weapon. Recruits are beaten for mistakes, publicly humiliated for hesitation, forced to watch comrades punished for weakness. The lesson is simple and brutal. Individual survival is meaningless. Honor is everything. Shame is eternal. To be captured alive is not unfortunate. It is unforgivable. Bushido, the way of the warrior, is invoked constantly, but what the soldiers receive is not the historical code of medieval samurai. It is a modern, militarized distortion. Loyalty without question. Obedience without limit. Death before dishonor. The nuance is stripped away. What remains is absolutism. Instructors tell stories of soldiers who charged machine guns rather than retreat, of units that annihilated themselves rather than surrender ground. These are not cautionary tales. They are ideals. By the time recruits are sent to the front, surrender has been mentally erased as a concept. Captured soldiers, they are told, are tortured for information. They are paraded in shame. Their families are disgraced. Their names removed from registries as if they never existed. Whether these things are true matters less than the fact that they are believed. Belief shapes reality. On remote islands across the Pacific, this conditioning collides with isolation. Orders are clear: hold the position, delay the enemy, fight to the end. What those orders do not include is a condition for stopping. No timeline, no contingency, no clause for defeat. And so when communications break down, when radios are destroyed, officers killed, supply lines cut, the last orders received become permanent. Hold, endure, never surrender. Back on Lubang Island, the soldier remembers his commanding officer's words vividly. We may lose contact, we may be scattered, but you will not die by your own hand. You will not surrender. You will continue operations until relieved. Relieved. The word becomes a pillar of belief. Relief will come. Japan will counterattack. The enemy will weaken. Orders will arrive. Until then, survival equals loyalty. As years pass, the psychological framework hardens. Every contradictory signal is interpreted through training. Leaflets claiming surrender? Enemy trick. Villagers saying Japan lost? Psychological warfare. Former soldiers urging surrender? Broken men who failed their duty. To accept any of it would not just mean admitting the war is over. It would mean admitting that everything endured, the hunger, the deaths, the isolation, was meaningless. The human mind resists that conclusion with extraordinary force. The holdouts are not ignorant of time passing. They notice changes. American patrols decrease. Local authorities behave differently. Technology advances, new aircraft, new equipment, unfamiliar uniforms. But these changes are rationalized. A pause before the next phase. A deception operation. A regrouping. Training has taught them that the enemy adapts constantly. So adaptation proves nothing. Isolation reinforces belief. Without alternative perspectives, ideas echo and amplify. The jungle becomes a closed system, every observation filtered through doctrine, every doubt crushed by fear of dishonor. To surrender would mean stepping into a world where the old rules no longer apply. A world where the emperor's divinity has been questioned, where loyalty did not prevent defeat, where obedience led not to glory, but to irrelevance. For many holdouts, that world is more terrifying than starvation or death. So they remain, not because they are unaware, not because they are insane, but because they were trained so effectively that surrender ceased to exist as a viable reality. The war, for them, was not something that could end externally, could only end with orders or with death. And on islands like Lubang, neither has arrived yet. 1952, Lubang Island. Rain season. Night. Rain hammers the canopy like artillery. Water runs in thin streams along the jungle floor, soaking everything: clothes, gear, skin. In a shallow dugout roofed with palm leaves, 3 men sit in silence. Their rifles rest across their knees. Their uniforms are now a patchwork of repairs. Their faces are thin, sharpened by years of hunger. One of them counts rice grains into a tin cup. Another sharpens a blade that has already been sharpened 100 times. No one speaks unless necessary. Words, like ammunition, are conserved. This is not survival as improvisation. This is survival as routine. By the early 1950s, the holdouts have lived in the jungle longer than they ever lived as civilians. Their days follow a rigid structure. Morning, observation. Midday, concealment. Night, movement. They forage for bananas, coconuts, roots. They hunt when they can, stealing livestock from nearby farms, leaving behind confusion and fear. Clothing is repaired with plant fibers. Firearms are cleaned obsessively, even when ammunition is almost gone. Every action is governed by discipline learned years earlier and never unlearned. Time, as the outside world understands it, no longer exists. There are no calendars, no seasons except rain and dry, no years, only continuity. Psychologically, the jungle becomes a closed universe. There is no neutral information. Everything is either confirmation of belief or enemy deception. When newspapers are found, they are read cautiously, then dismissed. When radios are heard, they are avoided. When loudspeakers announce surrender, the men withdraw deeper into the forest. To listen is dangerous. To believe is fatal. The longer they remain, the higher the cost of surrender becomes. Inside this isolation, identity narrows. They are no longer farmers' sons, students, clerks, or apprentices. They are soldiers because soldier is the only identity that still makes sense. Without the war, who are they? Men who killed after peace? Men who hid while the world rebuilt? Men whose obedience outlasted its purpose? Those questions are unbearable, so they are never asked. Fear plays a quieter but constant role. Not fear of death that was trained out of them. Fear of disgrace. In their minds, surrender is not an ending. It is exposure. It is facing villagers whose families suffered, facing officers who might condemn them, facing a Japan that may no longer honor what they were taught to honor. Even if they survive physically, they believe they will be erased socially. The jungle, by contrast, asks nothing. As the years stretch on, some holdouts die. Illness, accidents, occasional firefights with police or search parties. Each death reinforces the belief system. He died a soldier. He did not surrender. He remained loyal. The dead become proof that endurance is possible and expected. Attempts to retrieve the holdouts grow more deliberate. Former officers are flown in. Family members are brought to the islands. Letters are written in familiar handwriting, pleading for return. These are the most dangerous moments, because the words feel real, because doubt surfaces briefly, and because doubt threatens everything holding the psychological structure together. Most of the time, the men retreat rather than confront it. A voice from home is more destabilizing than any enemy patrol. On Lubang Island, one man begins to age visibly. His hair grays, His hands shake slightly when he reloads, but his posture remains rigid, his discipline intact. He still believes relief will come, because to accept otherwise would mean admitting that decades of suffering served no purpose. Human resilience is not just the ability to endure pain. It is the ability to preserve meaning, even when reality contradicts it. The jungle witnesses this quietly. It does not judge. It does not argue. It simply continues. And so do they. Not because they are cut off from the world, but because they are bound to an idea that refuses to let the war end. October 1972, Lubang Island. Late afternoon. The jungle has thinned near the edge of a cultivated field. Coconut trees stand in uneven rows. The sound of human activity, voices, metal tools, a distant engine, carries more clearly here than it once did. A man watches from the tree line. He is older now, his back slightly bent, his face hardened into something that no longer resembles the young soldier who landed here nearly 3 decades earlier. But the rifle in his hands is still clean, his posture still deliberate. He has learned to survive modernity from a distance. The world has not come back for him. He has come forward to observe it. By the early 1970s, the idea of Japanese soldiers still fighting in the jungle has become rumor, then curiosity, then disbelief. Newspapers occasionally mention sightings. Local police exchange reports that sound impossible. But on Lubang Island, the consequences are real. Farmers are attacked. Crops are burned. Shots are fired from the trees. To the villagers, the war ended a generation ago. To the men in the jungle, it never did. Search parties are organized with restraint rather than force. No artillery. No ambushes. The goal is no longer capture, it is persuasion. But persuasion requires a language the holdouts can accept. And that language is not reason. It is authority. In the jungle, the soldier studies a leaflet dropped days earlier. The paper is clean. The print modern. Claims Japan has rebuilt. That the emperor lives. That the war ended decades ago. He folds it carefully and places it in his pack. He has seen this before. The enemy lies patiently. What finally changes is not evidence, but structure. A Japanese man arrives on the island who does not carry a weapon. He wears civilian clothes. He speaks calmly. He does not shout into the jungle or demand surrender. Instead, he announces a name the soldier has not heard spoken aloud in decades. His former commanding officer. When the officer finally steps into the clearing weeks later, he is old. His hair white, his uniform gone, replaced by a simple suit. But his posture is unmistakable. He bows, deeply, formally, correctly, and for the first time in nearly 30 years, the framework that has sustained the holdout begins to crack. The conversation is brief. The officer reads formal orders. Dated, stamped, signed. They state clearly, unambiguously, that hostilities ended in August 1945. That all remaining soldiers are released from duty. That continued fighting is no longer loyalty. It is unnecessary suffering. The holdout listens in silence. This is not surrender. This is relief. The distinction matters. For years, the idea of surrender meant dishonor, collapse, erasure. But relief is something else. Relief means obedience fulfilled, duty completed, identity preserved. The officer does not argue. He does not persuade. He simply delivers the order that was missing, the final piece. When the rifle is finally lowered, it is done with ceremony, carefully, respectfully, not as a defeated man but as a soldier standing down.
Tiers come later.
Not immediately, not in front of others. They come with the weight of time returning all at once. The noise of the world rushes back in. Decades compress into minutes. The return to Japan is surreal. Cameras, microphones, crowds, a country transformed beyond recognition. He walks streets that did not exist, sees technology he does not understand, hears language that feels familiar but distant. He is welcomed, but he is also out of time. The public wants a story of fanaticism, of madness, of refusal, but the truth is more unsettling. This was not blind obsession. It was coherence, a belief system that functioned exactly as designed, long after its creators were gone. The holdouts did not fail to understand reality. They understood it too narrowly. They were trained to survive without questioning the framework that defined meaning itself. And so they did. For decades, when asked why he did not surrender earlier, the former soldier answers simply, "There was no order." It is not an excuse. It is an explanation. The war, for him, did not end with bombs or broadcasts. It ended with permission. Tokyo, Japan. Winter, mid-1970s. Snow drifts quietly between modern buildings. Neon signs hum. Trains arrive on time. The war feels impossibly distant here, reduced to textbooks, memorials, and carefully framed photographs. A man walks slowly through the city. He wears civilian clothes. His hair is gray. His posture still rigid, as if his body has not yet received the message that it is allowed to relax. People recognize him. Some bow. Some stare. Some avert their eyes, unsure what they are looking at. A relic. A hero. A warning. He is all three. For Japan, the holdouts create a profound discomfort. They do not fit cleanly into the post-war narrative of recovery and peace. They are reminders of a version of Japan that no longer officially exists, but was never fully erased. A Japan where loyalty was absolute, where surrender was unthinkable, where identity was inseparable from duty. The holdouts force the nation to confront the psychological cost of that ideology. Public reaction is divided. Some praise the soldiers' loyalty, calling it pure, unbroken devotion. Others see tragedy, lives consumed by obedience long after it lost meaning. Many feel both and do not know how to reconcile them. The government responds carefully. These men are not punished. They are not celebrated uncritically. They are absorbed quietly into history, because judging them too harshly means judging the system that created them. Globally, military psychologists and historians take notice. The holdouts become case studies not in insanity but in conditioning. They demonstrate how belief systems can outlast facts, how identity can override evidence, how humans, when isolated and reinforced, can maintain a constructed reality indefinitely. This is not unique to Japan. It is human. What makes the holdouts extraordinary is not that they endured hardship. It is that they endured meaning. They maintained a coherent worldview under conditions that should have shattered it: hunger, isolation, time, and contradiction. Most people break under far less. In interviews late in life, former holdouts rarely speak of anger. They speak of confusion, of adjustment, of the strange weight of returning to a world that moved on without them. Some struggle, some adapt. None truly reclaim what was lost. You cannot step back into time. And yet, when asked if they regret their choices, many hesitate. Because regret implies an alternative they could have accepted. And within the framework they lived inside, there was none. The story of the Japanese holdouts is often told as an oddity, a curiosity at the margins of World War II. That is a mistake. This is not a footnote. It is a mirror. It shows how belief, when reinforced by authority, culture, fear, and honor, can reshape reality itself. How the end of a war does not automatically end the war inside a person. And how obedience, taken to its absolute extreme, can outlive the world that demanded it. The war ended in 1945, but for some it ended decades later. Not with surrender, but with permission.